Sorry for the slight delay. We are waiting for some participants to come in. Today, this morning or afternoon or evening, whatever it is for you, we will talk about co-treatment of fecal sludge or septage in sewage treatment facilities, right? So this is a topic of much interest in many parts of the world now, where people are looking at utilizing existing sewage treatment plants for this kind of purposes. Some of the things that I will be speaking about, many of you may be already familiar, and it might appear to be quite basic, but to cater for the wider audience, we will cover some basic aspects as well. So please bear with us on that. So today's agenda, we will first have a short presentation by myself, introducing co-treatment, the principles, and evaluating the various factors that are relevant to co-treatment. Then we have a worksheet tool that has been developed. It's an Excel sheet tool, which will then be introduced, and there will be a demo of the use of that the tool. And finally, a review and discussion. So this is basically the agenda that we have for this afternoon. So first, the introduction. So this is basically a sewage treatment plant. We have adopted a common type, which is an activated sludge system. As you know, most of you would know that it consists of physical processes and physical biological processes. So the upfront the part of the treatment facility are usually the physical processes, pumping, screening, grit removal, and primary settling, right? And then you have the aeration tank and the secondary clarifier, which together functions as a physical biological process with microorganisms doing the work. So this is what a sewage treatment plant is about generally. And now we are going to add septage or fecal sludge into the inlet of this sewage treatment plant. And then we are now concerned, when we do this, what are the impacts that might happen to the processes that is going on, right? So this is basically the topic we are talking about. So when we talk about fecal sludge or sewage or septage, this fecal sludge or septage is different from sewage. And even though the origin is pretty much from human excreta, sewage originates from human excreta and wash water, and also some gray water that comes from bathrooms and kitchens and things like that. But septage also comes basically from human excreta, and sometimes the gray water is added as well, but it's not. In most cases, it's not. But then it is channeled through a containment, which could be a septic tank or a pit or some kind of a containment. And then if we look at a typical septic tank, for example, this is a diagram that shows a typical septic tank. The inlet, you can see the sewage actually gets in on the left-hand side through that T-pipe. Then there is some settling that is taking place where the solids settle to the bottom. There is some consolidation that takes place. Sometimes if there is a leakage of groundwater into this, then there could be a dilution. And there will be some anaerobic digestion of the settled solid. So this is these are the processes that are going on inside. And when we look at this containment, this is a proper septic tank, which could be watertight, but it could have also, you could have a septic tank which does not have a proper bottom. So you can have gray water, groundwater seeping in, and or you could have the water from the containment itself seeping out continuously. So depending on the type of containment, the sludge settlement, the processes vary, and that is what makes the fecal sludge different. And when we talk about fecal sludge or septage, it's actually emptied from the bottom of the septic tank or containment together with whatever liquid that is present above it. So that would constitute septage. And if it is a pit, for example, you might have very little liquid on top, so it becomes much more solid and much less liquid component to that. So that's basically what it is. But you can see from here also that the bulk of the water that enters, the sewage that enters, after settlement, the clarified water exits the containment. So it's actually leaving the containment either through the outlet onto a soak pit or to a filter or to the drain or wherever, right? So only the solids are being retained. So the bulk of the fecal sludge or septage consists of settled solids, which have also undergone some kind of anaerobic digestion. And this makes fecal sludge or septage very different from sewage. In terms of volume, much of the volume has already exited through the septic tanks. And the solids content can be different because obviously the solids are being retained. So the fecal sludge or septage contains much higher solids content as compared to sewage. The BOD or COD will be different, will be much higher for fecal sludge or septage. The inorganic content and garbage content could be high because many people abuse these things and sometimes it does not have a proper base. And therefore, when the desludging is done, the bottom mud and sand and things like that also comes through. The biodegradability of fecal sludge or septage is also different. We will see this subsequently. Then the variability. Sewage is, it is variable, but not that much. Whereas the septage can vary from tanker to tanker, from place to place, because the way it is coming from different containments and there's not much of mixing that is taking place. And finally, there's a potential contamination of fecal sludge or septage by toxic or industrial waste. The reason is because these tanker which are emptying the containments, they could also be taking some industrial waste from somewhere, which, you know, if the control is not very good, then that ends up in our treatment facility as well, right? So this is what the key differences are. So now going back to the sewage treatment plant, which is having this septage coming in, we need to understand by these differences, how will this sewage treatment plant, which is designed to treat sewage, now it's also going to handle fecal sludge, which is very different. So how will this impact the different processes in the sewage treatment plant? And what can we do about it to mitigate? What can we do about it to minimize? Can we do something to the sewage treatment plant so that the risks to the plant are minimized and the performance is not impacted greatly, right? So this is our task today. So what can go wrong? So number one, the flow could be too high, right? So if the flow is too much compared to the design, then the settleability in the settling tanks, the primary, the secondary, and so on, that could be impacted. Retention time becomes shorter, which means process time becomes shorter. And there could be washout of whatever solids or things which are retained within the tank. During high flows, it could get washed out. If we can have too much solids. So since we know the fecal sludge and the septage has very high solids content, this could now overload your screening step or your grit removal or your primary solids removal system in your primary settling tank. Secondly, your oxygen transfer efficiency could be impacted because in your aeration tank, you have a lot of inert solids floating around. There could be solids carry over to your secondary clarifier and overloading of the secondary clarifier. And if you're using a pond system, for example, the ponds could get filled up much faster by the additional solids that are coming in. And it may require desludging at a more frequent intervals, right? Too much of organics, BOD or nitrogen, because of the co-treatment, then will result in insufficient reaction time for the microorganisms to do their work, or insufficient oxygen to actually treat the total nitrogen and BOD that is now coming into the system. Shock loads, because of uneven application of the loads, the microorganisms will be unable to balance between the incoming waste and the total population of microorganisms. The variability of the characteristics, again, the microorganisms need to acclimatize. If you have a sudden influx of very high strength waste coming in, the microbial populations will be unable to adjust and acclimatize on time and be able to do the work of the treatment efficiently. And finally, you may have some toxins which may then kill off the microorganisms or inactivate them. Right? And finally, there's also potential where the septage or fecal sludge is added not to the treatment plant itself, but to the sewer manholes or to pump stations. Usually people do this as a matter of convenience, and this may cause blockages, grit and garbage settling in your sewers, pumps clogging, and erosion and blockage in your pumps and the pumping system. So this is another impact that could be going wrong. So these are some of the things to watch out for. Now let's look at the first part of it, which is talking about the volumes, relative volumes of sewage and fecal sludge or septage and the variations. So here we take an example of a city which has a population of about 200,000 people. And let's assume for convenience that 50% of those are having a sewer sanitation. So they're connected to sewers. And the other 50% is having a non-sewer sanitation using septic tanks or whatever. And then, so this pie chart here shows 50-50 split of the type of system. And now, when we look at the total sewage that is generated from this 50% which is sewer, and the total fecal sludge or septage that is generated from the other 50%, this is what we get. The septage volume is so small, and the sewage volume could be about 100 times or more compared to the septage volume. The reason we could have seen earlier is that the bulk of the liquid that enters the septic tank after settlement leaves the septic tank and leaving only the settled solids behind, right? But in the sewer systems, the entire contents are conveyed through the pipelines and reaches the treatment plant. So in terms of volume, this is what happens. And this, we are talking about a daily flow. So a daily flow has maybe 100 times more in terms of sewage compared to septage. But let's look at the variation over the day. This is a typical sewage flow variation. The graph here shows over a day, 12 midnight to 12 midnight. And you have a typical 2 peaks, a morning peak and an evening peak, corresponding to the water usage by people, right? So when more people use water in the morning, so you get a high peak in the morning and then an evening peak again. The rest of the time is lower. So this is how the sewage normally varies as it reaches the sewage treatment plant. But how does the sludge flow vary? So here, the sludge flow does not vary in the same way. It depends on the operating hours at which the sludge is received in the treatment facility. Usually it is normal working hours of 9 to 5, for example. So that's when the tankers arrive. And then it depends on the tanker volume, how many tankers arrive, the frequency of the emptying of the containments. And there could also be a seasonal impact. And on weekends, if the tankers are not working or the reception facility is not working, you get no flow. So the pattern of flow of septage or fecal sludge is very different from sewage. So when we mix up these two in a co-treatment scenario, you can expect a little bit of a variation, right? Now here we are. This is the same graph of the sewage variation over the day, similar 2 peak. And now let's superimpose the fecal sludge onto this. And this is what happens. You can hardly see the impact. So because here at the bottom, this is where the sludge is being added from 9 to 5, very small quantities as you saw. The equivalent quantities are very small, right, for the same population. And here, during this peak period, and also during the time which corresponds to when the tankers are discharging, it's a very negligible increase in the flow, right, the flow pattern. So what we can conclude is that the flow itself for co-treatment may not be a big issue of concern, right? Unless you're adding huge quantities, which in any case, there will be other limiting factors. So flow itself is not the main criteria that we should look for. Now let's look at this concept of flow, concentration, and loading. We saw the flow, that the flow is inconsequential, but we know that the concentration of total solids, for example, in fecal sludge or septage is very much higher than sewage. It could be 10 times more, or it could be even much more than that. But what is of concern to us when we talk about the treatment efficiencies of the treatment facility is the total loading that comes in. And how do we get that? It's a flow multiplied by the concentration is what gives us the loading. So even though the flow variation is small, because the concentration variation between sewage and fecal sludge or septage is very different, very much higher, then the loading could be significant. All right. Now let's look at this again. The flow, this is what it looks like, quite insignificant. Let's take a total suspended solids concentration of sewage about 300, which is typical. And let's take 7,000 for our sample of septage, which is actually on the low side, if you ask me. So you can see that it's very much higher, more than 10 times higher than the concentration. And when we multiply and get the solids, you see it is significant now. It is more than 10%. Earlier, you saw that the flow increase was not even 1%. But when it comes to the solid loading, it is already much higher. And similar ratios will be seen for the BOD loading or the nitrogen loading as well, right? So similarly, you'll find that the loading part of it can become significant. And here we have done this on the first bar on the left-hand side is the flow. The blue part is the sewage flow, and the red small tiny thing on top, that is the flow due to septage. You can see it's insignificant. But when it comes to solids, it becomes a little more significant, BOD, a little significant, and also nitrogen, right? And this, again, we are talking about the total over a day, right? But what happens when we look at the variation? Here's the variation of suspended solids coming to a sewage treatment plant due to the sewage. So the pattern follows the pattern for a sewage variation as well. So when the sewage peaks, the total solids peaks, because you know volume multiplied by concentration is the loads, right? So this is what it is. Now let's superimpose the solids due to fecal sludge or septage being added during the working hours of 9 to 5. This is what happens. Even though a small quantity, you might find that the daily impact is not great, but the hourly peak impact here, this can be quite significant, right? So what does this mean? This means that if you have a process, a treatment process, where your process time is short, and if that short process time falls within this peak period, then it could have significant impact. But if you have a treatment process which has a long process time, for example, an extended aeration, it can go up to 18 hours or even more than that. So then the loads tend to even out over the day. But in this case, when you have like an SBR, for example, which has a very short period for aeration time, the cycle times can be short. Then this kind of impacts has to be checked, and hourly peak may need to be checked, right? And similar patterns can be seen for BOD loading as well as nitrogen if we go for that, right? So this is a problem for short duration, and maybe with the equalization tank, an equalization step or a balancing tank, this could be mitigated. Now let's look at the organics itself. So far we talk about BOD as if it's just one number, right? So when we look at the organics fractionalization of that, let's start looking at the components of that. What is it made up of? The different types of biodegradability, for example. No? So here we have a digested fecal sludge or septage. What does that mean? Mostly our fecal sludge or septage comes from a containment where it has remained there for maybe a year or maybe a few years, often, because your desludging frequency could be in the range of 2 years, 3 years, or even more, right? So during that period, most of the organic matter has already undergone stabilization, and it has become inert matter mostly, and is no longer readily biodegradable. So this digested fecal sludge or septage, which is the common kind of fecal sludge or septage, which comes from pits and from septic tanks, which are emptied on a frequency of maybe a year or more. Very high percentage, maybe in this case I'm showing is a typical of more than 50% is already non-biodegradable, right? But it is particulate, which means it can settle out. So this non-biodegradable waste, if you pass it through a biological type of treatment facility, it does not really do much for us, right? So what it really means that we need to now look at this particulate aspect of it, and maybe we can remove it by some other means, a physical means, right? By settling it out. So this is the digested fecal sludge. Now we also have, fresh fecal sludge. Fresh fecal sludge has not remained in the containment for a long period. These are containments which usually, in public toilets or in community toilets, for example, which get emptied on a very frequent basis. They could be emptied on a weekly basis sometimes, maybe a month or so. And because of the frequency of emptying, the fecal sludge inside, the settled sludge inside, does not have much time to undergo degradation, right? So you find that the readily biodegradable portion is still very high, and there is still a big chunk which is slowly biodegradable, which means it has undergone some level of stabilization, but not so much, right? So you can see that the component of the biodegradable component is much higher for fecal sludge compared to digested sludge. This tells us something about how should we approach the different types of sludge depending on whether it is fresh or digested. And this is the whole picture which you can see here, that you find that the readily biodegradable part for fresh fecal sludge or septage is very high, 90%. And the particulate part is small. And secondly, the fresh fecal sludge also does not have very good settling properties, which means it doesn't settle that easily. Whereas digested fecal sludge settles much better. And you might be able to remove 55 or even more than that by settlement alone. And you only need to handle the remaining part in the co-treatment process. Here's a schematic of a co-treatment where we are doing a direct addition of the fecal sludge to the septic tank. And this is something that has been done historically. If you look at it, people do this. So they have an STP and they just dump the fecal sludge to the inlet without any kind of a pre-treatment or any kind of a pre-settling or screening or whatever. So it just goes in. And this is not a very good practice unless the quantities that you are adding are very small or the strengths are very, very low. So I would say that we don't do this unless you have a very tiny portion of sludge compared to the capacity of your treatment facility. Otherwise, you might have an upset in your treatment facility. The second one here is for fresh septage or fecal sludge. So you find here, this is highly biodegradable, and you may need a stabilization step here. This could be a digester or the stabilization tank where the incoming sludge is settled and digested. And only after that, the liquid then is co-treated here, right? And the solids could be co-treated in the solids part of the treatment facility. And here is typical characteristics of fresh sludge, COD, BOD ratios, and things like that, and some methods by which you can do it, the stabilization. And the effect of the stabilization is that your BOD gets reduced, the solids get reduced, and the solid liquid separation becomes much better, okay? And this is the most common, where the solid liquid separation followed by co-treatment. So as I mentioned, most sludge comes from septic tanks or pits where it has remained for a pretty long time. And therefore, a very big chunk of it is particulate and non-biodegradable. So we have a screening and grit, and then you have a solid liquid separation step here. And only the liquid part is then co-treated in the STP, whereas the solids can be either co-treated in the solid stream here, where combined together with the sludge coming from here, or it could be a separate stream for the solids coming from here. So this is the most common one. And you can have different types of solid liquid separation processes to be used, drying beds, anaerobic ponds, belt press, and so on. And you can see here that the percentage of total solids reduction can be a very high percentage, which means if you're using drying beds, for example, only 5% of the solids are then in the filtrate that is coming out of the drying beds. And similarly, there's a reduction of big portion of the BOD as well, right? So this is a good step to do so that you actually reduce the kind of loadings that end up being co-treated in your STP, right? And this one is if you have very dry sludge where it's not even necessary to do a solid liquid separation before this. So you could have like a drying bed, for example, and apply the dried sludge directly onto the drying beds. If the sludge is already well stabilized, and if it's a very high solids content, and only the liquid part that comes out of the underflow of the drying beds will then need to be co-treated in the STP. So this is another step, which could, again, all depending on the type of sludge that you're handling. It is possible that a city has both fresh and stabilized sludge coming to their facility. Then we need to make a decision. Is it good to blend it, or is it good to have a separate streams for the two types of sludge? Whatever, depending on the relative quantities that will be required to handle in that particular city. Okay. Now let's look at the impacts that we can expect when we co-treat on a treatment facility. What kind of risks can we expect, and how can we mitigate those risks? So the first thing we can expect is that there will be an increase in the sludge and scum because we are adding very high solids to it, and that will cause increased primary sludge, for example, even secondary sludge. And significantly higher organic and solids loading will be experienced by the STP. There could be shock loadings because of irregular addition of sludge, unless we have some kind of blending or some kind of stabilization, some kind of equalization tank. And potential toxic substances may be there. We need to take precautions for this. And screenings and grit volumes will also be high. You can expect this, right? So these are the general things you can expect as impacts on your STPs when you do co-treatment. Now on the liquid stream itself, let us assume that you have done a solid liquid separation, and then you are now adding the liquid part after solid liquid separation to your sewage treatment plant. First impact that is possible is that there is insufficient aeration capacity for the combined sewage sludge load. As you know, the STP has been designed only for the sewage load. Now you added additional organic loading, and is the aeration capacity sufficient? Something to be checked, right? And secondly, there could be a lower oxygen transfer rate because of the higher solids in the reactor, both dissolved and suspended, and that could cause the treatment facility to have less efficiency, in terms of oxygen transfer. Mixing effect, usually the mixing in the aeration tank could be by mixers or through the aerators itself, creating a mixing. And because of the high solids which are in suspension, that the mixing effect could be less, right? So this is another thing that is possible. Higher solids loading and residence time in your reactor, higher surface overflow rates of clarifier, considering possible lower settlability, because the settlability is low. That could cause overflow of solids out of the clarifier, both primary and secondary. Higher oxygen uptake for nitrification. Ammonia content in your sludge will also be high, and that will take up some oxygen where nitrification also takes place. And if you are using, if you are doing a denitrification with an anoxic zone, then you need to have an organic carbon source, and there's a possibility that this is insufficient, right? So these are some of the things we have to watch out for. And later when we look at the modeling, you'll find that we are looking at many of these things to see where are the risks and how can we mitigate them. And obviously the note down there says, if you have a solid liquid separation, then many of these things are minimized, because you're removing much of the organics, much of the solids ahead of the co-treatment part itself. When we have nitrogen removal, if your STP is increasingly, many countries are having standards for nitrogen removal, nitrogen or phosphorus removal. And nitrogen removal is done through two processes of nitrification and denitrification. And nitrification requires oxygen, so there will be a take-up of oxygen for that purpose. And if your STP, if your sewage treatment plant is designed to remove nitrogen from the sewage, you also need to check whether the additional oxygen that is required to remove the nitrogen from your sludge, the sludge, is that sufficient? And for the denitrification, again, the carbon source, as I mentioned. So the readily biodegradable carbon must be available for it. And usually in a sewage treatment plant, when we do denitrification, it's recycled. The flow is recycled to the head of the plant, and the incoming sewage is the source of of carbon. Here we have to check whether the combined wastewater and sludge has sufficient carbon. And the way it's done is to see that the BOD to the total Jalal nitrogen ratio should be at least 3. So that's the recommended ratio, to ensure that there is sufficient carbon source for this. Now let's look at different processes other than activated sludge. In a sequential batch reactor, this also works on a similar principle of activated sludge, but it operates on a batch mode. So you have different batch modes of fill, aerate, settle, and decant, that kind of batch modes. And each of these sequential, the mode, could have a very short time duration, right? And because of this short retention time, your instantaneous flow or the hourly peak flow may need to be checked, unless there is an equalization tank that has already been provided. And in any case, we need to check what is the peak flow after equalization, right? And process control should be managed to adjust the sludge wasting rate, the reaction times, and so on, to maintain stable conditions. In a normal activated sludge plant, is a complete mixed reactor where the entire contents are completely kept mixed. So you don't need to worry too much about it, because it sort of gets average out over the day. Whereas here, over the cycle, it settles, and then the sludge is remaining, becomes the return sludge for the subsequent cycle. And again, the biomass that is coming in could be different from the biomass that was already there in the earlier cycle, because different tanker loads could have different characteristics, and that could cause some acclimatization issues as well, right? In ponds, these are generally quite resilient, because ponds have very long retention time. So variations in flow, it's quite easy for them, for these ponds to handle. And if you have an anaerobic pond followed by a facultative pond, then you could, a lot of times, when you have very low solids content in the sludge, you could add directly into the anaerobic pond without a solid liquid separation, right? Provided it's a dilute sludge. But what will happen is that when you don't do a solid liquid separation up front, a lot of the sludge comes into the pond and it settles out there. And your anaerobic pond will start filling up with solids and sludge very quickly. And this may require desludging of the ponds on a more frequent intervals. Normally, ponds may take about 10 years or 15 years before you need to desludge it, and that's a very expensive and disruptive process. And if you co-treat very high quantities of high solids sludge, then you might find that you may need to desludge the ponds on a much more frequent duration. And the potential impacts, we need to also check that there is sufficient solid, there's the solids loading rate, volumetric solids loading rate for the anaerobic pond, and the surface loading rate for your facultative ponds. These are criteria not to be exceeded. And for the volume reduction caused by sludge accumulation, that could also impact the treatment in the pond itself, right? Next, we'll look at one more system, the upflow anaerobic sludge blanket reactor. This is an anaerobic system. And here, organic loading rates are important. And upflow velocity need to be checked under the co-treatment conditions. And sludge retention time, because maintaining the sludge blanket is very key to the proper functioning of these kind of systems, right? So this again is so sludge production retention time and the volumetric loading rate. We need to check that under the co-treatment conditions. Now let's look at in terms of planning perspective, right? In a city planning perspective, how do you look for co-treatment opportunities and co-treatment options, right? So this is how mostly the city managers are faced with this kind of dilemmas. So if you have a city, for example, then the first question to ask is, does the city have a sewage treatment system now, or is it planning to have one in the near future? This is the first question. And of course, if you say no, then the potential of a co-treatment is just non-existent, right? So you could then have two options of either looking for any neighboring cities where we could sort of have a cluster, right? This is being done in some places. So you could cluster with a neighboring city. So if the neighboring city has an STP, then possibly the sludge from this particular city could be taken to that city for co-treatment, or even if it's a fecal sludge treatment plant. Of course, it depends on the distance, right? It should be reasonable distance. And if no, there is no potential of that, then of course, the only option is to have a fecal sludge treatment facility, a standalone one, right? So there's no co-treatment possibility here. So we construct a fecal sludge plant. Now the answer is yes, a new sewage treatment plant is being planned for the city. Now this is a good option, a good scenario in the sense that we have not built anything yet, so it's being planned. And therefore we can evaluate the logistics of using the new sewage treatment plant for the purpose of co-treatment. Look at site availability. Is there enough land within that site to accommodate whatever pre-treatment or whatever other ancillary facilities that you are planning as part of the co-treatment scheme? Suitability of the site, maybe whether there is any residential or sensitive areas nearby which may have a problem when your tankers start moving in and out and so on. And then we can incorporate co-treatment as part of the design. So this is very easy because you have not built anything, and you could just say, okay, this is what we are expecting over that planning period, and this is my STP, and we can plan it and design the STP to co-treat, right? Quite fairly straightforward. Now, when you have an existing STP, it gets a little more complicated. Again, you still need to do the logistics evaluation. Is the STP close enough so that the tankers can move to that place easily, and there's available spare capacity? If the STP is already almost fully loaded, or you expect it to be fully loaded in the next 1 or 2 years, or if the performance of the sewage treatment plant is not up to the mark, it's risky, right? Then you may have second thoughts about doing co-treatment here. And what other technical constraints are there for co-treatment? This is the evaluation you may need to do. And then you decide what kind of pre-treatment is needed, what modification may need to be done to the sewage treatment plant, any retrofits that may be needed to accommodate the co-treatment. So this will be your way of trying to see whether you can co-treat at the existing STP. And the opportunities are mostly where there are sewage treatment plants which are underutilized and expected to be underutilized for the near future, within your planning time frame. And existing STPs can then be used with or without retrofits. And new STPs, as I said, can be designed, and then there's this opportunity for clustering with the neighboring towns which are within reasonable radius of 10 to 12 kilometers. Now, we can also have, these are not mutually exclusive. In other words, we could have part of the city having a co-treatment and part of it going to a standalone STP, standalone fecal sludge plant, depending on the logistics. If your city is very big and the sewage treatment plant is at one end of the city, it may not make sense to transport fecal sludge or septage from the other end all the way to the sewage treatment plant. So it may make sense. So here is where your economic analysis will come in. Is it better to co-treat in that place, or is it better to have another fecal sludge plant elsewhere? And many other options. So you could have combinations of options for the city. So the options are these: dedicated FSTP or co-treatment, or combination, or multiple. Interim or permanent. So you could have an interim arrangement. We'll do this for the next 2 years. After that, we will build a fecal sludge plant, for example. The logistics, some of the logistics could be overcome through the remote addition of sludge at pumping stations, for example, but it should be done properly. Whether you want to do a solid liquid separation, whether you need to do a digestion to stabilize fresh sludges and so on. And the influencing factors are these: availability of the plant, the size, capacity, and so on, logistics, site availability. What are the relative volumes of fecal sludge as against sewage? The nature of the sludge, whether you are going to be reusing the end products of your sewage treatment plant. Why? Because if there is some toxic substance in the sludge that is being brought in by the tankers, and that ends up in the sludge, in the STP, and as a result of that, your end product, your biosolids produced in the STP becomes contaminated and unfit to be used for certain purposes. For example, you may be using it for as an agricultural, soil replenishment or some kind of thing like that. The biosolids then become unsuitable for that purpose. And the final point here on the institutional is again a very important point. Now, who is running your sewage treatment plant? That could be one entity. It could be the city. Who is doing the fecal sludge? That could be another entity. So we have come across in many countries, these are two different entities. And therefore, the person running the sewage treatment plant is reluctant to allow fecal sludge or septage to be co-treated in the STP because they don't want to take that risk. It is not their jurisdiction. But if the same institution is doing both, then it becomes much easier. So you'll find that institutional conflicts sometimes prevent co-treatment from being done. It's one factor to be considered. I just want to talk a little about this discharge of the sludge at manholes or pump stations. So this is very convenient and it has a logistical advantage because manholes are everywhere. Pump stations also at many locations compared to the sewage plant maybe only at a very far location. And it may not make sense for the tanker operator to go all the way there. So when you allow this, you'll find many people take advantage of this. But there are many downsides to this, which we must consider. Number one, solids being deposited in sewers and causing blockages. Pumps being increased wear and tear because of sand and grit that's coming in, abrasion of the pipes again due to grit. Oil, grease, these tend to be very high in septage or pit sludge, right? And these cause clogging and blockages. And if it is a remote location, a manhole, for example, where people can just open the manhole and start discharging inside, then the control and monitoring of what is being discharged becomes extremely difficult, right? So this might end up with an abuse where people just dump whatever they like inside and no one is watching this, right? And there's a high risk of toxic or incompatible waste can be dumped inside. And by the time you detect it, it's too late. Maybe a sewage treatment plant or even your sewerage system has already been affected by it. Okay, these are some of the things. So we then must have a proper way to provide decanting stations so that the logistical advantage of remote addition can be taken advantage of. At the same time, we can have some safeguards like having a screening, a grit removal, and possibly a solid liquid separation process in these decanting stations before the liquid part is co-treated. And of course, we may have some kind of monitoring facilities where there's somebody there who's taking care to see what is being discharged and maybe checking where these tankers are bringing the sludge from. Let's look at operationalizing it now. Co-treatment, once you have decided you want to do it, the first thing I would recommend is start small. Don't go big time. Start small. There are many, many unknowns here, which we have tried our best to find, but you might find that something can crop up. So we can start small, keep the risk low. And as we learn, as we find that the risks are okay, is within our appetite, then we can slowly scale it up. Select only large sewage treatment plant. Don't go for small ones because the tendency for upsets is very high in small sewage treatment plants. The larger plants usually are more robust. They have more skilled people running it and they have more safeguard systems. And also, because they are large, they're able to accept a higher volume of sludge in comparison with small ones. And there will be a justification to spend some money some funding to put in facilities for pre-treatment and some ancillary facilities as well, right? Whereas when you have a small one, it may not justify this, right? Secondly, it's not enough to be large, but it should have sufficient spare capacity, which means if the plant is designed for a particular capacity, the current flow that is coming in should not be very high, should not be 95%, for example. If it is 80% or even 70%, then that is a spare capacity which could then be utilized for the co-treatment. The end products I've already mentioned earlier. The logistical part I've also mentioned. We can look at logistics and try to come up with a remote decanting station that would certainly improve the attractiveness of co-treatment. The cluster basis, that's a very good approach that should be tried as well. The institutional issues, these are real and must be addressed right up front. The variability of sludge is an issue, and every tanker could be different. And there should be some kind of a check on the incoming septage. Besides, if you can have a system of regulation where the tanker operators need to have records of where are they bringing the sludge from, and there is some accountability placed on the tanker operators of the sludge that they are dumping in. Right? So for new facilities, it's easy. For existing facilities, this is what we have to look at. What is the pre-treatment we need to put in? Whether you need to have an equalization, you need to regulate the tanker operators and monitor quality, increase the solid handling capacity in your sewage treatment plant, increase oxygen supply, and so on. Here, I will sort of going to stop here, but this is to decide on the existing sewage facilities, how can we carry out co-treatment and what kind of impacts can we expect, what kind of risk can we expect, and to give some indication of what we could do to mitigate those and still carry out co-treatment is what the purpose of the worksheet tool, the co-treatment worksheet tool, which will be demonstrated after this by my partners, the CDD team. Here, I just want to give these two links, which has been shared earlier. So there is a book on co-treatment. This book has been published by IWA, and it is available online also for free download. But in this link, you can find an updated version of the book. So I've done a little bit of updating, and it's brought to 2021. The earlier one was 2019, right? And then the worksheets are also downloadable. These are Excel sheets, which can be downloadable from the link that is also shown here. And with that, I've come to the end of the presentation. Thank you so much. And I will now hand over to the CDD Society team of Krishna, Ananda, and Debisha. And they will demonstrate the use of the worksheet tool. And also, then after that, we can have some discussions on what your thoughts are. And our whole idea is to expose this to as many practitioners as possible and get some feedbacks. And we are not, it's not perfect. And, you know, some of your feedback could be then used to make this better for common use by everyone, by all practitioners everywhere. It's a planning tool. It's not a design tool. I just like to remind on that. With that, I will call on Krishna, Ananda, and Debisha to take over from here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Yes, can you hear me? Yeah. So there is a question by Mr. Chris Chan on like, you know, how do we deal with heavy metals and what will be the effect of heavy metals in such kind of a situation when we co-treat? Will it be any different from, because heavy metals can be also in the sewage, but will it be adding like, you know, a lot of load if we are putting FS into the sewage treatment plan? Will the heavy metal concentration shoot up like anything? Can you throw some light on that?
Yes. So normally sewage treatment plants, they will not have heavy metals because it is usually taking domestic waste. Unless you have a combined system which also takes industrial waste, in which case your sewage treatment plant might have some treatment steps to deal with that, right? So if it is not compatible to a biological treatment system, then it will cause upsets. And why I mentioned this in this particular case is because when you have sewage treatment plants, the sewage is coming from connections from houses, right? And so it is a much more physically constrained system where some industrial waste usually is not so easy to be connected inside. Whereas when you have a tanker-based operation, the tanker could be dislodging from an industrial premise, and they might be taking waste from an industrial process. So there could be a process waste that comes in, right? So the risk of such things happening is much higher when you are considering a co-treatment. That is what I mentioned. But if your sewage is already having some heavy metals and it is already being designed to cater for that, of course, you need to check whether by co-treating, it is going to add substantially to the load and how it impacts. What we have considered is basically the normal domestic sewage load. It has not looked at the industrial kind of load in this. I hope that answers.
Right. Thank you, sir. I think there is one more question by Jonathan. It is, what is your experience on problem of high solid waste in FS?
Yes, so solid waste in FS, we don't have that much in Malaysia because our septage comes mostly from septic tanks and not that much from pits, right? But when you have these coming from pits, where sometimes people use these also as to dump garbage, right? I'm not saying ours, we don't have any, but we do. But normally the normal screening process will be able to handle that, right? So a lot of times your emptying itself becomes a problem if there's too much of garbage in the pits or in the septic tanks, it gets clogged even at that time, right? So it is not a problem of, it upsets the entire process because normally a screening will remove solid waste like garbage and things like that. So I would say in terms of experience, we don't have that much, but I've seen pit latrine emptying especially, where the emptying process itself is hampered by solid waste inside the pits. So they need to use rakes or things like that to remove the solid waste, or use some specialized kind of equipment to empty the pits also, right? Yeah, thank you.
Yes. So I can also see that Anand wanted to add to something on this answer. Anand, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So the solid waste with associated fecal sludge, let's come from mostly the users who are using the toilet as like outside, like public toilets, where you can see the disposal of napkins, disposal of bottles, disposal of all plastic covers are being disposed there. And usually we also see in Indian context where institutional septic tanks are being emptied, the quantity we at FSTP Devanahalli, when we looked at it, the quantity ranges from 2.5 kgs per load. The per load, I mean 4 cubic meters. So we have also seen maximum of 5 to 10 kgs of solid waste being received at an FSTP. So this usually differs with respect to the user behavior, and which we can address by IEC campaigns and educating them not to do it. And any treatment plant, let it be an STP or FSTP, a proper screen chamber has to be there to prevent any blocking or clogging of the process in the modules downstream. So that is very essential for that.
Thank you, Anand. There are 3 more questions. We'll quickly take them and then we'll move to the next section of the presentation. So one, Mr. Kapanda asked that what is the best way to deal with the situation where you have varying degree of biodegradability in the sludge, fresh versus stabilized sludge in the context of co-treatment. So he's asking how will fresh sludge versus stabilized sludge affect the co-treatment process?
Yeah, so when we have fresh sludge, it is highly biodegradable. And so if the quantities are small, you could directly add into the STP, because it is just like sewage mostly. It's slightly stronger than sewage. But if the quantities are large, you may need to have a stabilization tank to sort of remove, bring the BOD of the fecal sludge down to a more reasonable figure, and then co-treat. So that's what I would do with the fresh sludge. Whereas if you have well-stabilized sludge, it is very easy to do a solid liquid separation because settlability is much better. So we can do a solid liquid separation to remove a lot of the solids together with a big chunk of the organics as well, and then do the co-treatment. So I believe Mr. Kapanda is from Lusaka. I can't recall, but I remember that the sludge from Lusaka was from pits, but was said to be very high biodegradability. So I think that kind of sludges may need a digester before co-treating in STP. That's what I'm thinking. That is possible there. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Anand, yes, would you like to take the next two questions? One is on co-treatment in anaerobic systems, and the other one is the implication on the ONM. Yeah.
Thank you, Divisha. See, I see the first question is on using anaerobic filter kind of system, DWATS kind of system to treat fecal sludge. Yes, definitely you can, but that requires a process optimization and design. See, you can't directly use an ABR for treating fecal sludge because two parameters. For example, one is solid handling capacity, the loading rate, what you load versus the HRT or the SRT. Those will be impacting the entire treatment process. So that has to be optimized. So what we generally do is we design an biogas digester or an anaerobic stabilization reactor in combination with a dewatering unit like planted drying bed and unplanted drying bed. So you can look at options which will first deal with your solids, separate the liquid and solid in the fecal sludge. Then the liquid part can be still treated with the combination like ABR, AF and planted drying bed. But anaerobic systems have that buffer to handle more solids and organic load, even though there is a limitation, that is the nutrient removal capacity. They are little back when comparing to aerobic system in terms of nitrogen removal and phosphorus removals. So there might be a hybridization required if you want to achieve both nitrogen and phosphorus removal in the same treatment system. What is the second question, Division?
What kind of cost implications due to addition of FS to STP in terms of ONM of the
STP? You understand one system is there in your place. You are operating it at one particular capacity. For example, I'm having a 100 MLD plant. I am operating it at 50% capacity. So there is different concepts, components involved. One is HR, then is the consumables, then the electricity and asset management. So there are 4 components that are involved in operating a system. So these components are not going to vary even if your FSTP is running at full capacity or half capacity. So ideally what it implies is when your capacity is underutilized, you are actually spending more amount of cost in HR, asset management, electricity consumption, everything per KLD comparison or per MLD comparison. But when you optimize your utilization to the full extent, this cost is eventually comes down to per MLD, lesser than what you are operating at half capacity. So in this way of understanding, when I add FS in a 50% utilized STP, it might increase the utilization not hydraulically but organically to its full capacity. That means I am operating a system at an efficient level to manage maximum amount of septage within a system and also not increasing any cost. But when you put up additional equipments, additional units, additional labor requirement, then that is when it has a very significant implication on the cost of O&M. So that's when you have to add more fund to operate those systems. That's how I see this based on the experience of running an STP and also an FSTP. I see it.
Okay. Thanks, Anand. So I think with this, we will be taking up the questions later on. So in the interest of time, we'll move to the next section of the presentation. Over to you, Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you, Divisha. Thank you, Dorai sir. Thank you, Ananta, for the questions and the responses. So,
Krishna, your video is not visible. Can you remove the shutter from your camera? Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. So, right. What we are trying to do now is understand how to work out the quantities of fecal sludge that can be added to an STP through a tool. So before we do that, as always, there is a context in which co-treatment works, right? So what is the context of the city that we're looking at? So for the purpose of this simulation, we have considered that there is a city, right? It has an STP based on activated sludge process, also called ASP, with a capacity of 25 mLD. Now, what's the scenario like? So we are working with this scenario that right now in 2021, if you look at the left part of the graph that we have, we are talking about utilization of the STP. So we are saying right now the STP is 50% utilized, that is operating at 12.5 mLD. 2025, it will move to 75% utilization, and by 2030, it goes up to 90% utilization. In the same time frame, we are looking at the right side of the graph. If you see how much septage is estimated to be generated in this particular city, we are assuming that right now it's about 100 KLD that we have to co-treat. By 2025, we need to co-treat 200 KLD, and by 2030, we need to co-treat 150 KLD. So now we have some questions before we get to the tool, and let's see if the tool can actually answer them. And another important consideration is, okay, before we know how much to co-treat, we also need to know what are the characteristics of the fecal sludge or septage and sewage that are coming in. So fecal sludge characteristics or septage characteristics. Practically, we can understand by taking samples from the trucks that are running in the city or other desludging vehicles. Sewage, we can measure by what's coming into the STP. So these need to be done. We need to have a practical understanding rather than a theoretical basis for arriving at the influent characteristics. Now that we have some assumptions of the estimated quantities and assumptions on influent characteristics, there are some questions that we'll try and explore and see if the tool answers some of this. So how much FS, fecal sludge, septage can the STP co-treat at the end of each of the periods? That is 21, 25, and 30. And is co-treatment possible at the end of each period? That's one. Number two is, will solid liquid separation be necessary? Right, Dorai sir was saying solid liquid separation typically is preferred in certain, in most of the scenarios, and without solid liquid separation, there are very few cases where we would go with that. Such a scenario does it exist here? And number three, if solid liquid separation is set up, can I co-treat any quantity of fecal sludge or septage? That is there a limit or is there no limit? And if there are limits, so then what other options need to be considered at any milestone, that is at the end of each of these periods? So I would request you to kind of have these questions in mind. I'll now ask Ananta to give you a demo of the tool, and then we'll come back and see if the tool is answering these questions. Ananta, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Krishna. Is my screen visible to Krishna?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a tool that is designed for a specific purpose to engage practitioners in FSM. Either it could be a planner, it could be a designer, or it could be a government official who are looking at how I can adopt FSM in my locality, and I want to utilize an existing system, or should I go for an individual standalone system? So these decisions can be arrived by using this tool. So this tool is comprehensively designed in basic understandings of what what factors that are considered in terms of designing an STP, and what are all the implications that it might cause on an STP's performance with an addition of particular amount of septage or fecal sludge that is coming. And to do that, what sort of data is required? So some level of groundwork need to be done by the practitioner to collect those data. So in this, we are demonstrating 5 sheets here. So for the purpose of making you understand what are the components of this tool and how the tool responds to your inputs and what you can interpret from this tool. The first one is, this is your STP as explained by Mr. Krishna. So this STP is an activated sludge process based system. So it is designed for 25 MLD, that is 25,000 meter cube per day. And it has a current inflow of 50% capacity, that is 12,500 meter cube or 12.5 MLD. So this has a screen chamber and followed by the adopted treatment system. And this is designed for these 3 major parameters, that is considered for solids, BOD and nitrogen. So TSS is total suspended solids, BOD biological oxygen demand, and TN total nitrogen. So these are the values the typical STP we have considered is designed for. So now in the second sheet, you will see, okay, now we had this STP understanding of design parameters of how much it is being utilized. Now we look at another component that is being added, that is how much of FS or septage that is going to come from the town, which the STP need to handle. So here you will be given an option to enter the data of how much ever the fecal sludge that is estimated from your town. So based on that, you can feed that data here. So once we feed that data, you can see there is 5 indicators that are provided, and each of them provided with 2 values. What is the level of utilization, whether it is exceeding the design capacity of the STP, or is it under the design capacity of the STP. And accordingly, based on the risk, there will be different color codes, which we will see now in detail. So as I said, the STP's codes are given there. Like for example, you see here is the serious risk, then significant risk, minor risk, and a safe risk, a safe zone where we can safely treat the fecal sludge. So each of this risk is color coded: green, light gray, orange, and red. So the tolerance limit is if the design capacity, either in terms of hydraulic or organic loading, if it is between the range of 0 to 5%, then it is considered, the tool reads it as a safe situation. When it exceeds 5 and reaches up to 10%, this will be a minor risk. And between 11 to 19, it is reading it as significant risk. That is, it's having a very significant risk that beyond which it would be a very major trouble in terms of operation, equipments installed, and all that. And the serious risk is considered when the design capacity is breached by 20%, higher than the design capacity of the STP. So here, the situation we have considered a septage of low or moderate concentration, which will have TSS of 10,000, BOD of 6,000 mg per liter, and TN, total nitrogen, of 1,000 mg per liter. So in this scenario, it is like a direct addition. So there is no intermediary arrangement for doing a solid liquid separation. This situation considers a particular volume of FS with specific concentration and solid stream concentration is directly added to the fecal sludge. Then there is a third option where it allows you to assume a solid liquid separation capacity. So depending upon what kind of solid liquid separation technology we choose, it could be a screw press, it could be a gravity thickener, it could be a centrifuge, belt press, or it could be any other system that is robust to handle and do a quality like 50% of your liquids or 60% of your liquid is separated, and you can concentrate and give you a thick and condensed solid stream that can further be co-treated within the existing solid handling capacity of the STP. It doesn't need to be having another level of digestion or any other thing. So that mode of selection of technologies is up to the practitioner and what is feasible, what is locally available. So if I consider a solid liquid separation, 50-30% is being considered here. This adds additional to this 5 factors, that is daily flow, how much is the peak flow increase, solid load, BOD load, and TN load. It also provides you an additional factor called as total volume of solids that is produced, which indicates how much from the fecal sludge that has to be additionally handled by the existing facility. So these, looking after all these factors, here with an assumption, we have to get this major data set. So one is the capacity of the STP. You need to know what it is designed for, what it is current utilization rate and its inflow. And in case if we are doing a groundwork and you do sampling, you will collect what is the average range of septage characteristics. It could be a moderate, sometimes it could be higher range. So you need to arrive at this particular values, which will conform to the ground reality. Then whether we are having a solid liquid separation or with no solid liquid separation. If that is the case, then different set of assumptions to be taken up. So each technology provides you a particular level of solid liquid separation, solids removal, and it also helps in reducing BOD to a certain level, because when organic particulates are removed, certain level of BOD is also removed with the solids. That reduces the load, the organic load on the liquid stream. So that has to be co-treated in the secondary modules. So in most of the STPs, there will be a primary clarifier, or there might not be a primary clarifier. It will be just equipped with the equalization tank. If you have a primary clarifier or a pre-treatment, then the particular values like how much that particular primary clarifier is designed to remove the solids, BOD, and TN has to be taken from the DPR, the design basis of the STP. So these are the data that I am going to use here to simulate and show you how the tool responds. So this is what we were discussing about. It has an inflow, screen chamber, primary clarifier, an aeration tank, which is an activated sludge process, and then a secondary clarifier. So all those data which we saw in the previous sheet is already embedded in it. So here first assumption is it's operating at a 50% capacity. There is no solid liquid separation. So the case scenario says 100 KLD is what I'm getting from the town. So is it safe? Yes, it is safe, because all the 5 indicators you see here, that is per day total solids removed. It is also interpreted in per hour how much solids is removed. Then what it is impacting in terms of peak flow to the system. Then how much solid removal efficiency, how much the load is you are loading in, solid loading. Then BOD load and TN load. If you see, still there is a 40% on an average, this minus 37, minus 40, minus 42. They indicate there is still a spare capacity available in your system. Then there is an optional analysis or the criteria which talks about the oxygen demand. So that oxygen demand is also having a spare capacity of 2000 kg of oxygen per that can be still utilized. So there is no load on the blower or the equipment that is installed. Then how do I know how much still I can add into this FSTP? Let's look at higher capacity like 600 meter cube. So you can see there is a serious risk in terms of solid removal, solid loading. There is a minor risk in terms of BOD loading. And also there is a significant serious risk on the oxygen requirement. So now you can downplay the number to see how this tool is changing. With 17%, it says significant risk on solid, increase in solid removed. Then similarly, a significant risk in solid loading rate. And there is a significant risk with 2000 additional buffer capacity need in the oxygen requirement. So again, I will downplay this. You can see how the tool is coming down and showing whether it is compatible or not. So you can see almost oxygen requirement is satisfied, solid loading, BOD loading, TN loading is all satisfied, except that increase in solid removed per hour. So this is not a major risk, it's a minor risk, which you don't want to take up if you consider the O&M perspective. So you can optimize until a particular point beyond which you can't add. So for this case, we found that 329 KLD is what the optimum capacity, the maximum capacity of fecal sludge that you can add into the system without compromising any of that 5 parameters and the additional oxygen requirement. So now with the same capacity of fecal sludge that we are adding, 329, if we assume a 30% and 50% solid liquid separation, either in the form of screw press, decanter, or a thickening tank, gravity thickener, can it still handle? Yes, it can handle. There is no deviations on the indicators that we have seen. So now we will see what will be the maximum tolerance with solid liquid separations. Okay, you might see the green thing, indicators are not changing here, but the oxygen requirement is having a toll. So then we have to see what is the maximum quantity that I can add. Still it says, so 544. So this is based on our simulation. We found 544 KL. When I do solid liquid separation, the 544 KLD can be treated in the STP when it is receiving a 50% capacity. And when I don't have solid liquid separation, we will have a limit of 329. It's almost like 1.5 times or 2 times we can add additionally. But in this scenario of solid liquid separation, you will have an additional factor to look at, that is 54 meter cube of sludge is also additionally generated from this unit. Then you have to check whether your existing STP solid handling capacity or equipment can handle or accommodate this additional volume of sludge generated. With this, I stop here. I'll pass it on to Krishna for demonstrating the other simulations.
Yeah, thanks, Ananta. So again, just we'll get back to the key questions with the simulations that Ananta has done, and just recapping what was shown, right? So without solid liquid separation, we see that, the co-treatment capacity is, we can do up to 329 KLD of FS, co-treat so much quantity at the current utilization, which is at 50%. As the utilization goes up, that is, as we reach 75%, right? So we see that we can only co-treat 178 KLD, but our generation is expected to be 200 KLD. So we are getting more than what the STP can co-treat without solid liquid separation. And as we go towards the 90% utilization, we see that while our generation is 150 KLD, we can only co-treat 90 KLD. Now let's look at what the same graph looks like with solid liquid separation added to the STP. So we see that at 50% utilization, 544 KLD is possible to be co-treated, while our requirement is 100 KLD. As we go to 75% utilization, we see that 297 KLD, almost 300 KLD, is possible to be co-treated. And even at 90%, we are almost able to co-treat 150 KLD. Now, what does this mean? So these are numbers, but how do we take planning cues from this? What does it mean for a planner? Somebody who's looking at co-treatment, somebody who's designing a co-treatment solution for the city. And again, if we go back to Dure's presentation, so there was a point where he mentioned, how do we look at a city and do co-treatment planning for a city from a larger perspective, right? How we are looking at FS generation, what other options are possible. So what do the simulations tell us? The STP can co-treat at the end of each period. So summarizing this in a table, will solid liquid separation be necessary? Right now in 2021, at the end of this period, may not be necessary. We can go ahead with direct addition. However, by 2025, as the utilization goes up, solid liquid separation is essential to handle 200 KLD. And also, if solid liquid separation is set up, can I co-treat any quantity of FS? The answer is no. As the STP heads towards 100% utilization, in this case 90%, its ability to handle FS continues to reduce even with solid liquid separation. So we need to look at other options. What are those? So to ensure that 200 KLD can be handled in 2025. Solid liquid separation units need to be set up. So if this is the only place where FS is being treated in the form of co-treatment, then we have no choice but to set up a co-treatment facility with solid liquid separation. And that needs to be ready by 2025, which means at least 6 months before 2025 kicks in, right? The facilities need to be made operational so that we can have a trial run and understand what the impacts are and ensure everything is working fine. Now let us look at 2030. And if the FS generation crosses 150 KLD, right now we are in a safe territory, right? The generation is estimated to be 150 KLD, and the FS, the co-treatment capacity is almost 150 KLD with solid liquid separation. But assume the city grows a little more, the sewage connections do not go as planned, and the FS addition becomes more than what is required. Then we definitely need to look at an alternative option for co-treatment. Now, which is maybe if there is another STP that is being planned in the city, can we co-treat there? You'll have to explore that, or multiple standalone FSTPs, like because it's 150 KLD, and depending on the distance that the trucks or the desledging vehicles need to cover to reach the site, we need to look at what sort of options are the best for that particular city. Now for this, planning needs to start at least from 2025, at least. So ideally we should plan today and make sure the city is going in a certain direction in how it manages its FS and sewage. But at least by 2025, this needs to be done. Otherwise, we are looking at a potential problem and misutilization of the STP by 2030. Now, the other option is to look at how can we see that the areas closer to the STP can make use of available co-treatment capacity as much as possible, right? And then for areas which are further away from the STP, this current STP, can we identify other STPs that can co-treat, or sites where FSTPs can be set up? Now, this is dependent on what sort of funds are available, how much land is available, and the way city itself is growing. So those need to be taken into consideration. And most importantly, we have to ensure that the new facilities are operational by 2028 at least to enable the transition. So transition not just from an STP perspective, right? Different systems need to be in place so that by 2030, eventually when the volumes will increase, we are able to handle all of it effectively. So that the time between 2028 and 30 will enable us to transition to not just the technical parts of STP or FSTP operations, but also putting the whole value chain into motion so that we are able to manage the entire FS load effectively. I'll pause here and the floor is open for further discussions. We'll take more questions. Over to you, Divisha.
Yeah, thank you, Krishna. Thank you, Anand. So yes, so we have got one question on by Isabel. Please, can you tell us where the co-treatment design tool has been used? So yeah, Anand, I can see you have volunteered for that. Yeah.
Yeah. So this tool we have multiple times trialed out in terms of looking at how manual calculations are coming out in terms of looking at the limits set by the tool, and we also piloted by assuming various scenarios with existing raw data that we have collected from the field. So this gives a comprehensive idea to us that we were convinced. The tool directly gives you an indicator what might go wrong, where you have to pay attention, and if there is an issue, then what kind of steps that a practitioner need to look at. So once it is indicated, it's easier for anyone to adopt a measure to mitigate that issue. So that way, we have trialed it out in terms of desk study, multiple times, multiple scenarios, where we see whether the tool is giving the same kind of accuracy across different data sets.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
Yeah. I think Isabel, probably you're asking whether this has been validated. So this design tool, this is not a design tool really. It's actually a planning tool, and it was published as part of the book. So it was an appendix to the book, which was published in 2019. And at the time the book was drafted, it has been reviewed by several reviewers who also looked at the tool. But I wouldn't say that it was a very comprehensive testing of the tool. But there was some checking of that done. But subsequently, it has been used in many contexts. I have personally used it in Bangladesh and also in Lusaka, in the Lusaka sewerage co-treatment project. So I'd actually used that. So that kind of thing has been done. And recently, of course, like what Ananta said, they have done quite a comprehensive, scenarios using the tool to validate and try to get, whether this is working in the way it's supposed to work. To that extent, it has been tested and verified. I hope that answers.
And if I may add to that, so one of the objectives is also use this tool to do a bit of ground truthing, right? Some of you in the participants would have definitely taken up co-treatment at your sites. Now, it would be good to see when you use this tool, it has already been shared. Are you kind of able to get the same results with what you have demonstrated already? And is that in consonance with the tool? So if that's happening, then the closer the tool is with reality, then it becomes more useful for practitioners. So one of the objectives is also for a lot of the practitioners to use this tool on sites that have already been implemented. Some of the case studies have been there, and some of you are definitely implementing co-treatment in cities that you are working with. So yeah, I think it's important for us to use this tool and see how that works in terms of what the ground conditions are, what the tool shows, and reduce the gap.
Okay. Yeah, I think we have some 5 more minutes. Do we have some time, Jan? Okay. So what we can do, we'll just wait for 5 more minutes for any more questions, and then we can close. And also, I think it has been already written on the chat box, but yeah, on both the tool and the book, both of them have been already shared on the FSM6 platform, so you can access them and then try it out yourself for your context.
And to add, we have also run simulations for other STP technologies, which is waste stabilization pond. The tool allows you to do that. Waste stabilization pond, anaerobic, upflow anaerobic sludge blanket, and also trickling filter. So these are also available in the tool, the link that is shared for someone to try out. And there are some protected cells which you can play around with to understand how the sheet itself works.
Yeah. So there is, I think, one more question about the final takeaways. So yeah, I'll then start with each of the presenters. So what would be like, things that you would like the participants to take home from the presentation?
I think one of the most important things is that the co-treatment is an option to be considered. That's one thing that we must look at. And I know that particularly, like for example, maybe a year back or a couple of years back in Indonesia, people are very reluctant to look at co-treatment because they have had some bad experiences of doing co-treatment without consideration of the impacts and the risks. And then it causes a catastrophic failure, and that makes it like people don't want to touch it. So I think we are now trying to show that, yes, it is possible to do co-treatment if you do it in a proper way. And you can actually incorporate the consideration of co-treatment when you are planning a new STP. That's something that you must try to do. And I know that in many parts of India, in the last couple of years, I think this has become very, very much entrenched. And every new STP that is being planned, they try to see whether they can co-treat. And one of the key things here is also the realization that you cannot have a city which is 100% sewered. That just doesn't happen, you know, and that's our experience in Malaysia as well. Unless it's a planned city where the city comes after the infrastructure has been built. Then we have Putrajaya, for example, in Malaysia is this administrative capital where all the infrastructure was built and then the buildings were built. Then you will have 100% connected and you don't have on-site systems. In any other city, you will have some pockets which cannot be connected for various reasons, which means that whatever STP you plan must also cater for this on-site system sludge that will come from there. So that co-treatment of that small component will be there. So in any STP, we should look at that. And for existing STP, the risk is a little higher, but I think it makes sense to look at that as an option. And if it can be done, and if the risk can be mitigated, and if the costs are within, reasonable, range, then it is worthwhile to consider because it's a single site. You don't need to acquire another site for your FSTP, for example. And the same team can manage both STP and the fecal sludge part. So there's a lot of advantages going for that. And it's also our experience in Malaysia that we have some standalone fecal sludge plants, but the majority of the sludge is co-treated. It's all with solid liquid separation and co-treatment at STPs. That's, I would say, the bulk of the septage treatment in Malaysia is being done that way. So that is one key takeaway. And the second is there is a tool here and there's a book here which helps you to look at the thing, look at the topic in a much more systematic way. And it won't give you all the answers. It's not a black box. You can understand it. You can tweak it. And we are available. And we can work together. And you come to the range of solutions that are possible. After that, the design must still be done. The tool will not tell you this is the answer, go and do it. That's not the purpose of the tool. So firstly, getting awareness of co-treatment and helping the practitioners to understand what are the issues involved and using the tool to come to the range of answers that are possible. I think if those are the takeaways, then I think we'll be happy with the outcome from here. Krishna, you might want to
add. No, sir, I completely echo what you're saying. So it gives us a range of options. It's a planning tool. You have to use it that way, and it's not a black box. So designers, once we have got the range of options, and then how it fits in with the broader city planning for handling FS and sewage, then we pick up and figure out how to design the specific components that are required to handle the FS. So we have to, and it's also taking a risk management approach, right? Doing it in a very systematic way instead of, assuming that the STP is there for co-treatment and then going ahead and then later figuring out, oh no, I've landed in a lot of trouble. So there's a systemic approach that can be taken to eventually get to where we want.
Thank you, Krishna. Anand, is there anything you'd like to add?
I concur with Durai sir and Krishna. Just be practical, look at ground realities, and use the tool to give some interpretations, then validate them in the ground. Then it's a better way to get at the solutions. So don't just rely on textbook data and interpretation from the tool. Please do validate. And if you have any questions or any doubts in terms of interpreting the values from the tool, please reach out to any of us. We will be there to support you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anand. Thank you, Krishna. Thank you, Durai sir. So yes, I can see that we are almost time. Thanks a lot to all the participants for sticking around till the very end. And thank you for your questions. And as our presenters mentioned, that we will be available. Our contact details have been also shared. So feel free to reach out to us whenever you are taking up any projects where you feel that co-treatment might be an option worth exploring. Feel free to reach out to us, go through the book, use the tool, and let us know what are the thoughts that you have on the applicability of the tool. So yes, thank you so much. And hope you have a great time attending this session and the sessions that are to come. Wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. It's been a great experience. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.